Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the Huron County Federation of Agriculture All Candidates meeting for the 2015 federal election. I am Joan Vincent, the Huron County Federation of Agriculture President. It is appropriate that we host an agriculturally oriented all candidates meeting, as Huron County is the most agriculturally productive county in Canada. Canadian agriculture is big business, with 1 in 8 Canadian jobs being in agriculture and agri-food. Statistics from 2013 show that 158,000 full-time equivalent jobs were generated by economic activity associated with the farm sector. The same report on economic contributions of the Ontario farm sector shows that $3.9 billion in Canadian tax revenues were generated by farm sector economic activity, with $2.1 billion of that going to the federal government. I would like to thank Ben, Yuda, Gerard, and Alan, the Huron-Bruce candidates, for participating this evening. As I introduce each of the candidates later, I will provide their full names and the party that they represent. The agenda and rules were available at the door on your way in this evening. Most important is to show respect to one another. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes opening and closing comments. The candidates have been instructed that if they go over these time limits, their microphones will be shut off. Huron County Federation of Agriculture Executive Director Ethan Wallace is controlling the mics this evening. Thank you. We will have approximately 45 minutes for written questions. Then the last 30 minutes will be available for members of the audience to come forward to the microphone to ask questions. Members of the HCFA will coordinate written questions, which will be shown on the screen. Lori Gordon, our office administrator, and Erica Murray, first vice president, will be working at that. Members of the audience are encouraged to submit written questions for this portion of the evening. These questions are to be on the HCFA notepad paper and given to Ken Scott, wave your hand please, Margaret Baker, or OFA Member Service Rep Margaret Vincent. They will continue to collect questions throughout the evening. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question, then their microphones will be shut off if they go over this time. The last 30 minutes of the evening, we will have questions from the audience at a microphone set up in the aisle. The questions for these will be limited to 1 minute, 1 question per person. Please use the index cards to record your name and question and submit it to Ken, Margaret, or Margaret for the draw for the order at the microphone. Extra notepads and index cards are available at the back of the room. All candidates will have an opportunity to answer all of the questions. Keeping time for us tonight are John Rowe and Tony Martins of the Clinton Toastmasters Club. We thank them for volunteering their time. Cut-off times will be strictly adhered to. I would now like to introduce Ben Lobb, representing the Conservative Party of Canada.
Well, there's my speech. Good evening, folks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Family farms are the backbone of our country. For generations, our farmers have fed Canadians and the world while providing jobs and opportunity across Canada. Trade is vital to Canada's continued economic prosperity, and we've pursued new markets for Canadian farmers, expanding the number of countries Canada has free trade agreements with from 5 to 43. This includes the landmark free trade agreements we negotiated with the European Union and with Korea. Farmers in Huron-Bruce stand to benefit significantly from the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement. It will reduce or eliminate tariffs on virtually all agriculture products grown in Huron-Bruce. Canadian pork, tariffs of up to 30%. Canadian beef, tariffs from 40 to 72%. Food-grade soybeans, with a current rate of up to 487%, and Zucchini beans, over 600%. Our Prime Minister is committed to continuing to defend our system of supply management in the Trans-Pacific Partnership free trade negotiations, just as we have done in all the previous trade agreements. Health Canada, through the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, PMRA, is taking a scientific approach to the issues surrounding neonicotinoids by actively working with key stakeholders as well as provincial and agriculture and environmental ministries. We've made continuous improvements to the advance payment program to stimulate investment. Proud to represent you in Ottawa, and together we're building a better Canada and a better agriculture sector. Thank you.
I would now like to introduce Jutta Spotthauser of the Green Party of Canada.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here today. I am Jutta Spotthauser, and I'm born and raised in Germany. I landed in Canada over 20 years ago. Agriculture is what brought me to this part of the world. My experiences consist of continuous learning and real practical work on our farm, and also multiple volunteer services. My husband Ralph and I are married for 21 years. We have 4 children. We are a team. In the past, I stood up for many different issues, and I will continue to do so, to ask tough questions, to find out what is needed for all of us. The Green Party is a national party that takes a stand on all major public issues. Our platform has 4 major pillars. It's sustainable economy, good government, strong communities, and real climate action. Huron-Bruce will have a bright future if the federal government will invest into the people and renewable energy. Canadians need a guaranteed livable income. They need national farmer care and the end of tuition to have healthy citizens. I have signed the Food and Water First Pledge to show my commitment to our #1 resource, water, and also to the land to continue food production. Our leader, Elizabeth May, gives me the freedom to work for you. The Green Party is the only party with a policy of no whip votes, and as a Green MP, I will place your interest first.
Thank you, Jutta. I would now like to introduce Gerard Gresses of the NDP Party.
Good evening. It's good to be back in Holmesville. One of my earliest experiences in agriculture is probably my most naive. I foolishly accepted an invitation to the rock concert and was promptly dropped off in a field with a 10-gallon pail. But I want to stress the importance of community tonight. We've all taken a role in bettering our communities, and I think Ottawa should follow the example of our rural towns, our hamlets, and our farms. Because when the community needs help, the community pitches in. We don't take sides, we don't argue about who failed who. We roll up our sleeves, we open our hearts, our wallets, and we get things done. Now, Huron-Bruce needs a candidate that's willing to bring those rural values of care, charity, strength, and determination up to the national level. and an ambition to improve Canada is crucial to this election, and the NDP wants to make a difference from the people up. We placed second in Huron-Bruce in 2011, second at almost every single polling station in this riding, and we've built on the success of our past campaigns, on the dedication of our volunteers, and of the selfless people who put their names forward on ballots past. We're strong, and we're growing in numbers every day, because people want change, and we have to end the culture of entitlement in Ottawa. We have to cut out the fraudsters, the deceivers, the wasters of money, because the reality is, if you or I were in the same position, we would be in jail. So why is it okay in Ottawa? Now, Harper won his first election on the back of the Liberal sponsorship scandal, promising openness and accountability. Instead, his own caucus raised the bar on malignancy and malfeasance. But there's hope and there is optimism. And we have an opportunity to end the entitlement. We have an opportunity to provide national daycare. We have an opportunity to clean up the environment, to bring jobs back to Huron-Bruce. But the NDP wants to seize this chance, start rebuilding Canada the same way we do our communities, from the people up. This won't happen overnight, but we have to try because we are all worth the effort.
Thank you, Gerard. Alan Thompson, I'd like to introduce the Liberal Party of Canada.
Good evening, my name is Alan Thompson. I was born and raised on a family farm near Glamis. That means I spent close to half of my life on the farm. Now, I'm not going to try and out-farm a room full of farmers. Farming was not my profession. I went off to university, studied journalism, worked for 17 years with the Toronto Star newspaper, a decade of that on Parliament Hill, and most recently I've been teaching journalism at Carleton University. But I like that slogan, farmers feed cities, that you see on bumper stickers. And I feel as if, in a way, I have lived in both of those worlds, growing up on the farm, working in the city, and appreciate how vital it is that we have not just one debate, but two dedicated to this subject. And it's perhaps unfortunate that in all the national leaders' debates that we've been watching, there hasn't been very much discussion of agriculture. So I'm glad that we're doing that this evening. Let me tell you just a little bit about what the Liberal Party proposes for agriculture and my views on the subject as well. I think the most critical thing is stability for our farmers. Stability is key. Food security in this country requires a strong, viable agriculture sector. And for that, farmers need bankable, predictable support when they need it. That also means we have to protect what we have, supply management, take steps to support non-supply managed commodities. I think it's also vital that we restore research into agriculture, evidence-based policymaking. And most important, our Member of Parliament needs to be a strong rural voice for Huron-Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. We will now move to the written questions. Once I get one. The first question is, in your opinion, what is the biggest issue facing Canadian agriculture today? Ben will answer first.
Thank you for the question. The most important issue facing agriculture today at a federal level is increasing markets for our Canadian products on the world stage in which we compete, where we face reduced tariffs, zero tariffs. 30% of the world's market with the European Union, we were able to accomplish that. In addition, Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement, hugely successful. Now that we're coming into the closing stages of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, these offer farmers up and down every single country road in this riding an opportunity to compete with the world markets. It allows companies like the Hensel Co-op, Huron Commodities, Snowblins, Thompsons, Parrish and Heimbecker, to all compete with world players and being able to sell our commodities at a low, without the pressure of tariffs, and to be able to compete with the United States and the European Union producers, all the while being able to defend and support supply management here at home. We've been able to secure 43 different trade agreements with 43 different countries, protecting supply management each and every time. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Ben.
Well, this morning I listened to the debate from the Federation of Agriculture, and there was not just one big issue, there was several. So the main was research, closing research station here in Ontario. We need local research, and we have different situations. We can't really have basic research out west and transfer it here. Also, labor shortage. I think it is very important that through better education in the high schools, young people realize what opportunities there are out there. When I came to Canada as an agriculture engineer, I was told there was a surplus of engineers. Well, guess what? Now there's people retiring, and I could have a job tomorrow. And so there's a tremendous need in high schools that in Huron-Bruce, every high school has in their job fairs agriculture present. Also, the risk management, the federal government has cut the funding for the agri-stability. It's a program that does not work. The farmers don't see value in it. So I think we have to come together, sit down with a Council of Canadians on all levels, farm organizations. Farmers know what they need, and so we have to design a program that works.
Thank you. Gerard?
Okay. If I was to say specific to this area, one of the biggest, if not the biggest challenge is succession planning and trying to actually prepare for the future of farming. Because we're seeing, if you want to call it the death of the family farm, we are seeing that. Farms, mid to small size farms, are disappearing. They are being, amassed into far larger operations. And we're getting to the point where we're not too big for ourselves, but we are definitely too big for anybody who wants to enter this industry. And the debt alone, having to have the money to even buy in, to buy some land, to even buy a piece of equipment, is so high that it is incredibly discouraging. So yes, we do have to start with training, we do have to start with skills, we have to start with getting people interested in the industry, but we have to really put our heads together and come up with a way to make it an affordable industry to get into. Otherwise, we are going to see the number of farmers decline, though the number of farms may get larger and larger. And the NDP is very committed to trying to create those mentorship, those skills training programs, and make sure that we do have ways for young farmers to actually be able to get into the industry. And another issue that is really prevalent here, and this is in all of Canada, is these either-or situations. And we were seeing this with the TPP as well. We're seeing non-supply managed sectors competing against supply managed sectors, are really butting heads. And this doesn't have to be that way, but we really have to be able to sit down and talk. And it's very much the same with, the pesticide issue. You know, we have the complete ban versus the let's do this in an integrated way. And if we can start really collaborating, cooperating, and having those difficult discussions, I think that would be a great step to bettering our whole agricultural situation in Huron and in Canada.
Thank you. Alan?
I think the single most important issue, as I said in the opening, is stability for our farmers. And that's individuals who work on the land, farmers, and those who rely on agriculture. And this can be accomplished in a number of ways. Now, one of them is access to world markets. Exports are the name of the game for many who farm these days. But it's not just trade deals and access to markets. I think farmers facing financial hardship through no fault of their own should be given bankable, predictable support to avoid financial catastrophe. I also think our Prime Minister and our government needs to make agriculture and farming a top priority. It has been a long, long time since we've had agriculture ministers of the caliber of Eugene Whalen or Don Mazankowski, people who were highly respected by farmers, who would reach out. I've heard of farmers who would get a phone call in the tractor on their cell phone from Don Mazankowski. Hi, how are you doing? How are things? That level of communication and cooperation and designing programs, reaching out to farmers for them to help to design the programs that are meant to assist them. And finally, I think in an agricultural riding like this one, we need a member of parliament who will stand up for those who live in rural communities, who will stand up for farmers and not be punished by a prime minister if they do so.
Thank you. The next question is, how do you and your party plan to support sustainability and growth in the beef and broader livestock industry? Yuta, we'll start.
I think it's very important when you look at the trade agreement. Minister Ritz said today that, supply management is probably not on the table in Atlanta, but I mean, there's no real commitment. So we really, as a Green Party, stand behind supply management. We don't trust these maybe statements. Basically, if supply management, our domestic market is at play, like we basically giving up for a trade agreement, our domestic market security, that is not sustainable. So it is important to don't set mixed signals and really do what we say. So the Green Party will definitely not trade away our supply management. And also on sustainability, we will encourage research, also geared not to industry-led. We believe in private, there's partnerships, but we believe also in public research that is needed for other ways. There's many ways of growing food, and the organic farmers need research as well. So this is another approach. Also on sustainability, it is an important forage, how we grow it, and have also cover crops. So there is not only one way to grow, and it is important to serve all farmers and also more and more consumers.
Thank you. Gerard?
I think one way to support this, first and foremost with livestock, is to not compromise our standards. And what we have seen in the past is pressure from Europe, pressure from the United States, really asking us to comply to their standards without really taking the consideration to realize that Canada put these standards in place for our livestock products to be able to protect Canadian farmers, to be able to hold us up to Canadian standards. And every time that we enter into another agreement, more and more pressure is being put on us to change our standards without any consideration from them that maybe Canada's onto something. Maybe they actually set those standards for a very good reason. And as well, we need to quit holding, and this would be on the local market, we need to quit holding the little guys, those small abattoirs. We need to quit holding them to large factory farm standards, because again, it's not an issue of when the outbreak's going to happen with the local abattoir. We're seeing, giant listeria outbreaks because our current packing plants, these huge processing plants, don't have the monitoring capacities. They've been slashed, they've been gutted. And yet, if you got, say, a bad pork chop at the local abattoir, you could trace it back to the pig. You could trace it right back to the side road. And so we can't keep compromising our standards for the sake of the people that are far bigger, and especially international operations that could really wipe out our supply in one go. And we need to make sure that we have reciprocity in trade agreements. We need to make sure that, yes, there is capacity for a huge market or a specialty market, say in Japan or in Europe, but we have to make sure that not only is there the market, but there's actually the demand for these products as well. It's great to say we're going to open the doors for this, but if we have a lot more coming in and there's no point in us shipping out, we're not doing ourselves any favors.
Thank you. Alan?
We had feeder cattle and pigs on the farm I grew up on, but that's a long time ago, and farming is vastly different now. I think beef and livestock farmers clearly need us to look at business risk management funding in 2018 and beyond. Market volatility risks are greater for beef and other livestock farmers. They don't have crop insurance or supply management to fall back on. Ontario has a risk management program. It was meant to be a three-way partnership, but the federal government has refused to participate in that partnership. There were very significant cuts, hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts to the agri-stability program, which means that farmers wait too long for too little support. Personally, I think the federal government should seriously look at supporting and participating in programs like the RMP in Ontario. And we should make a really concerted effort to make programs like agri-stability work for farmers, beef, livestock, and other farmers. And yes, pursue markets. But the trade deals that we sign, yes, maybe there are dozens and dozens of them, but few of them are actually fully implemented. We have to do more as a federal government to help beef farmers access markets in Europe and fund research, look at various ways that we can help this and other sectors. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you very much. 10 years ago, I was reminiscing about the debate that took place here 10 years ago. And if you think back to those times, the beef farmers were really on their backs, just coming off of BSE and the crisis therein. And if we look how times have improved and how times have changed and some record prices in the beef sector, it's been fantastic. As a government, we've made key trade deals to keep those markets open, and we need to continue to push forward to make sure we keep those markets growing and as well open, and that's vitally important. As well, we need to push back, and we have done a great job with this. Minister Ritz and Minister of Trade Ed Fast have done a tremendous job with the country of origin labeling. We've pushed as far as we can go. We've won it every step of the way at the World Trade Organization, and now if the United States doesn't make a move, they'll face retaliatory tariffs. So we've done our job protecting Canadian farmers. We've made investments in traceability, vitally important. We've made investments in agri-marketing that allows our product to be marketed around the world. And if you take a look at what's happened with Ontario corn-fed beef, tremendous success story. CFIA is regarded as world-class. If you take a look at the investments we've made in our market access secretariat, we now have agriculture trade commissioners working on the ground in the countries that we sell to. Why is that important? Because when there are issues, and there will be issues in agriculture, the companies and the countries that we do business with, they understand that we have world-class traceability, that we have world-class producers in this country, and that our markets stay open. And if you look at the recent performance, if there is a hiccup in production.
Thank you. Next question is, the government has signed numerous trade agreements over its time. The monthly trade numbers have been largely in the negative and seem to be growing larger. We are basically trading raw commodities for manufactured goods. How will signing another trade agreement change this dynamic? Start with Gerard.
Well, the question, I guess, how will it change this dynamic, and especially with the TPP, is nobody knows. A lot of this has been done outside of the eyes of the Canadian public, outside of the eyes of Canadian industry. I mean, we saw just in last week it was the Prime Minister coming out and saying the Canadian auto sector is not going to like this trade agreement. And it's those types of things, the lack of transparency, the lack of actually letting the Canadian public know what is going on with the trade agreements is hurting us more than ever, because we don't know what to expect. And by the time the paper's signed, we're all going to be caught with our pants down here. Now, with the TPP, I mean, we have to make sure, and with other trade agreements too, that the value added in Canada to these products actually adds value to them. It shouldn't be seen as a hindrance here. Creating these things, creating the value added in Canada is vital. And we can take a look at, say, the oil pipelines. Rather than shipping raw exports of tar sands oil to the US, we could be creating processing jobs, adding value to Canadian products in Canada. And that would create tens of thousands of jobs at home in Canada. Because yes, we are shipping raw commodities out, and raw is the key word here. We should be processing those, adding Canadian value, creating Canadian jobs in Canada before we just give this stuff out for very little in return.
Thank you. Alan?
Canada's prosperity starts with the middle class, and it's well known that trade industries pay on average 50% higher wages than non-exporting industries. That gives Canadians more money in their pockets. That's why the Liberal Party supports free trade. Canada is a trading nation. We need free trade agreements like the TPP. They create jobs for Canadians, contribute to economic growth and long-term prosperity. Canada has, in the past, signed trade agreements that did not jeopardize our supply management. But at this point, how can Canadians trust that Mr. Harper is protecting supply management and negotiating in good faith when he is acting with his usual secrecy, keeping Canadians in the dark about the deals that are being made at the negotiating table?
Thank you. Ben?
Well, Alan, you know that's not true, because the Prime Minister has been very clear that he will protect supply management. And in addition to that, he's concluded 43 other deals in the past, and he's been able to reduce tariffs and protect supply management. So I don't know how much more clear you can be, but I think he's been as clear as you can be. We need to continue to push forward on trade. It's vitally important. Under the 13 years when the Liberals were in government, they virtually concluded no trade deals of any significance. Our government, under the leadership of Stephen Harper, has concluded the big deals. We're making the big deals. Once the Trans-Pacific Partnership is concluded, we'll have tariff-free zones of up to 70% of the world's market. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had the best 10 years in agriculture that I think we've ever had in the last 100 years. Just imagine the possibilities and the opportunities that are out there in the next decade and beyond. Take a look around, in and around, just here in county alone, the investments that are being made each and every year in agriculture. Take a look. We've had the best 10 years, and the next 10 years are going to even be better.
Thank you, Ben. Judith?
NAFTA has a 6 months cancellation time. Well, the deal with China is a little bit different. I hope trade agreements don't get worse than this. I truly don't think that it makes sense to lock us in for 31 years. And on top of it, the Foreign Investment Protection Act gives foreign investors more rights over Canadian property. And I don't want to have, face the nightmare when municipalities get their first lawsuit. So the Green Party certainly is very concerned, and we'd rather, instead of free trade, I mean, we believe that trading is important, but the conditions have to be better. So what about fair trade instead of free trade? And I leave you with that.
Thank you, Judith. The next question is, what is your party doing to improve benefits for Canada's veterans? Start with Alan.
Good agriculture question, but it's a very, very important one. I fail to understand why the current government has treated our veterans so shabbily. It's a government that professes to support our military, and yet time and again you see examples of veterans who struggle to survive, struggle to receive their benefits. And you don't have to take this from me, you can talk to them. They've formed coalitions and they're active, many of them, against the Conservative government because of its treatment of benefits. One of the recent announcements that Justin Trudeau put forward, the Liberal Party would radically change the way we treat our veterans. We would return to the lifetime covenant that our veterans used to enjoy. If you put your life on the line for this country, you deserve to know that we will take care of you for the rest of your days, not treat you as if you're a client of an insurance company who has to take a one-time settlement and live with that. We would return to lifetime pensions for injured veterans, if that's their choice. We would introduce dramatic new funding, 4 years of paid education for those who leave active service and decide they would like to return to school, reopen Veterans Affairs centers that have been closed across this country, making life even more difficult for veterans, and frankly, just give our veterans the respect that they deserve.
Thank you. Beth?
Thank you very much. This is a topic I am very passionate about. I was on the Veteran Affairs Committee for over 5 years. Our government modernized Veterans Affairs. Our government has made investments. Even in the tough economic downturn, there were no cuts to Veterans Affairs. The budget of Veterans Affairs has been over $3 billion per year. The care that they receive, the ability for frontline caseworkers to make decisions. We see this on a monthly basis at the Legion in Goderich. They can make decisions, the frontline caseworkers can make decisions to benefit our veterans on a daily basis. In regards to PTSD and mental health issues, Canada is amongst the best in the world in treating our military that way. The earnings loss benefit has been a huge improvement for income to provide income to them. The permanent impairment allowance is also hugely important for those veterans that have been severely injured. When they leave the Canadian Forces, now they have meetings with Veterans Affairs so that they know what their benefits are, that they know what's out there and available to them. When I started on Veterans Affairs Committee, it was paper files still. Under Liberal neglect, it was still under paper files. Now they have electronic medical files so they can get answers quicker and get the services they need. Just alone, a veteran that needed hearing check to get hearing aids, it took 16 weeks. Now it's down to 4 weeks, and we're continuing to work better. Not over 90% of the $3 billion goes directly to the veterans. We've delivered for veterans, and we'll continue to deliver.
Thank you. Yuda?
Kevin Page, the former parliamentary budget officer who was put in place because this government was elected on the accountability. I guess he did too much of a good job and he lost his job. But he just pointed out today that we send our soldiers into war without calculating the total cost. So we have to budget as well. What are we going to do with the soldiers? How much do they cost? on, like, if they have PTSD. They need service dogs. They need access, not certainly to retraining, but other things have to be there. So the Green Party certainly will support the veterans. And if you are interested in all the details, I encourage you to go onto the greenparty.ca website, look at our platform and policy book, Vision Green, and you will find a lot of details what the Green Party is planned for our veterans.
Thank you. Gerard?
Well, first, I find it unfortunate that a lot of those meetings Conservatives had with veterans were in a courtroom. And it's good to set aside $3 billion a year. But when it goes unspent, it doesn't matter how many figures you have on paper. And just a fun note, if you added up the $1.13 billion that the Conservatives did not spend in Veterans Affairs and the $800 million they did not spend for Aboriginal education, you would come up with a $1.9 surprise surplus. But the NDP plan for veterans, now that you asked, is to actually treat and recognize PTSD and other mental health symptoms, and that includes introducing a $450 million plan to protect and provide pensions for PTSD, long-term care, and providing funerals for veterans. We want to update the Veterans Charter, end clawbacks for retired and disabled veterans, and also increase the survivors amount from 50% up to 66%. And you know what? A big part of this too, treat all veterans equally. And that means providing, just get rid of that class system. You know, it shouldn't matter if you served in Bosnia or if you served in Afghanistan. You're a Canadian veteran, you're willing to lay down your life for this country, and you deserve the benefits that should be coming to you.
Thank you. The next question is, what is your party's stand on Bill C-51, and how do you plan to protect the right to security and privacy of Canadian citizens? Ben?
Well, thank you for the question, and I think you'll find all the candidates up here support Bill C-51. I'm kidding. We've had a few debates on this topic already. Bill C-51 is vitally important. Times have changed. We've seen increased security threats in this country, and we have to modernize. C-51 modernizes. Department agencies need to be able to share information in real time. This is what this bill accomplishes. In addition to that, we've made criminal offenses to promoting terrorism on the internet, terrorist recruiting new people into terrorist cells. We've made those criminal offenses as well. So we've made sure that we've remained current, and that is what we have to do, and that's what Bill C-51 does. In addition to that, and recently, if you've been following on the news, we've also seen another bill that's been vitally important, is the act of terrorism by dual citizens. And now that we're starting to revoke the citizenship of dual citizen people and sending them back to the country where they've come from, we have tremendous support for that. So Bill C-51 is bringing us into the 21st century, fighting terrorism, making sure that we do not have events that unfolded like on October 22nd, so that we're protecting all Canadians. We need to make sure that we're up for the challenge and that we're current and modern. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith?
Well, according to international experts, it is not really the case that we make everything safer. We altered 15 laws, existing laws. So we also have four former prime ministers who are against C-51. And for those who are not aware of it, our leader, Elizabeth May, was the first one who pointed out that we actually will lose a lot of rights. It is basically political speech is restricted by not enhancing public safety, and so it is probably likely unconstitutional. So there is a lot of Canadians who are against this, And I don't know what we have to do to fix this. I also find that it is troubling when 6 former Supreme Court justices are opposing C-51. And I'm glad that Elizabeth May is not alone anymore, and she is a leader again. Many of the firsts she is able to point out and do for our country. So the NDP is also against it, and I hope that other party members will join.
Thank you. Gerard?
Well, the NDP stance is crystal clear. Repeal Bill C-51. This is a piece of legislation that never should have been passed in the first place. It puts all Canadians basically on equal footing and under equal suspicion as terrorists. We should not be subject to investigation, to detention indefinitely, or even for increased periods without knowing the reason why. This bill will do that. And if you look at even closer to home, it's unclear who's a terrorist. I mean, promoting, advocating, recruiting, these were already crimes to begin with. And let's use the example of the Toronto 18. We already had the law enforcement possible to break up the biggest terrorism case in Canada in recent history. We already had the tools to do this. But we see the Conservatives jumping on this train, get people afraid, especially in an election year. We had 2 men killed in Canada in October. We had 1,200 missing and murdered women. And those 2 men justified a war. Those 1,200 women, not a damn thing. Now, furthermore, it's unclear who is or who isn't a terrorist. And you can take a look at the United Church of Canada and their hate speech, according to Conservative governments, because they opposed Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands.
Thank you. Alan?
Well, as you can see, C-51 was very controversial. And I firmly believe that the Liberal Party and my leader took a position that, yes, it was controversial. You probably heard about it a lot in the news. But I think it was the right decision to take. And that's about finding the balance, and balance can be found between security and liberty in this country. There are situations, and some of them we can't foresee. There are situations where we can justify very narrowly defined security measures that will protect Canada and Canadians from acts of terrorism. But it's equally important, and this is the balance, it is equally important that those measures are counterbalanced by methods for protecting our security. And the Liberal Party put forward very, very clear and specific amendments to Bill C-51. One of the most significant was to create parliamentary oversight for our national security agencies. It is a mystery to me why Canada does not have the same mechanisms for parliamentary oversight of national security that our allies do. And this was a proposal put forward by the Liberal Party. Mr. Harper ridiculed the very notion of elected members of Parliament serving on an oversight committee to oversee our national security agencies. And when those amendments came forward at committee to try and improve Bill C-51 and create more balance, both the governing Conservatives and the NDP voted against those amendments. I think there is a way to balance security and liberty.
Thank you. For those submitting questions for coming to the mic later in the evening, if you would please sign your cards, as it's your signature that's going to decide who gets picked to speak at the mic. Thank you. You can get your card back if you would like to sign it. Okay. The next question. Do you see an opportunity for farmers if marijuana were to be legalized? Judith?
I don't know, and I see that in Kincardine, municipality of Kincardine, they're trying for a long time already to set up a growing operation. There was a lot of job interviews, and people were excited to start in the former greenhouses where there was tomatoes grown. So I think it is very highly regulated, and I know that different people see an opportunity in there, but it will be difficult to follow all the regulations. So I think there's more people already on the list who want to grow it, but I would not consider it personally. I know that legalizing marijuana for medical marijuana is that's, I guess, right now the most crop operation on the table. It will bring a lot of taxes. We foresee that probably the tax revenue will be $5 billion per year, and it will be very helpful to implement different programs that we all can benefit from.
Thank you. Gerard?
Well, if Doritos grew on trees, yes, there would be lots of opportunity for farmers. But with legalization of marijuana, I mean, there are, you can take a look at a lot of things. You can take a look at, how much 1 acre of hemp would go towards making paper compared to, 40 acres of trees or 4 acres of trees. I mean, there are uses for the byproducts, definitely. Now the NDP's stance is decriminalization, and really what we would also want to do with that is take a look at these court cases that regular Joes who may have gotten caught, say smoking a joint or something like that. We don't want to use your taxpayers' dollars. I don't want to use my taxpayers' dollars, sending them through the court systems, paying police's salaries, paying the judge, paying the Crown to prosecute these people on cases where they go so far and it just gets thrown out anyways. We are wasting money with this. So if we decriminalize this, if we take a look at the cases, is this really necessary to be prosecuting in the high courts? No. We don't want to waste our money. You don't want to waste your money. So as far as opportunities for farmers, though, if that was the avenue that Canada eventually took, sure. There are a lot of uses, I guess, for hemp. Say clothing, paper especially, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Alan?
Well, I had a feeling someone would find a way to turn the legalization of marijuana into an agriculture question. So thanks for the question. It's an important one. To be honest, I hadn't thought of this in agricultural terms. As you are probably aware, the Liberal Party has proposed the legalization of marijuana. And the primary reason for this is to avoid a situation where we are turning our young people into criminals and wasting resources in the justice system, in corrections, to prosecute and detain and criminalize activity that should not be a crime. Now, legalization is not about making it easier for young people to access marijuana or to encourage young people to use marijuana, just as we don't encourage young people or anyone to use cigarettes. This is about regulating this substance, getting the distribution of marijuana, which is happening in our society, to get the distribution of marijuana out of the hands of criminal gangs, to regulate marijuana, to legalize, and to generate tax revenue from this substance. I think it's one of these things that's a progressive move for our society. Yes, controversial for some people, but an important step to make.
Thank you. Ben?
Well, obviously our party's against the legalization of marijuana. I think if you look at the United States with all the various health and overdose issues they've had there in the states that have legalized it, that makes the biggest case for it. There's been cases in the past where people say, well, the tax revenue makes up for the health issues. Well, that's wrong. The cost to society far exceeds the tax revenue you bring in. Agriculture opportunities, Not likely if you plant it like you think you're going to plant your soybeans. There's no chance at all, because that's not the way the marijuana would be grown. So you can eliminate that. The only opportunities that will be out there for farmers, it really wouldn't be viable to begin with, because if you take a look at what they've built in Kincardine to grow medical marijuana, it's millions and millions and millions of dollars just to get out of the gate. It's really at the pharmaceutical grade, pharmaceutical level of technology that's involved in the facility. So I think there's much better and more practical uses for our farmland, which goes back to the farmers that feeds cities. Let's use our agriculture land to feed people and to feed the world. We're losing enough of our farmland by urban sprawl. It's vitally important that every inch of every farm in our riding is used for the betterment of mankind by growing food and definitely not marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Are you willing to speak and or vote against any of your own party's positions should they be contrary to the best interests of this riding? For example, the weakening of supply management by allowing increased imports of milk and milk products. Gerard?
Well, in terms of supply management, it's a non-issue for us because we want to take it out of our free trade agreement. We don't think farms should be used as bargaining chips. Now, as far as the question itself, yeah, I mean, you have to be able to negotiate, I guess, and it's the same, I guess, if you want to use trade agreements as an example. It's simple yes or no is very definite. And you should make your yes conditional, and I think this is the power that a member of parliament should have, is making your yes conditional on saying, listen, this is against the best interests of my riding. Let's sit down and figure out what the flaws are, what the riding's needs are, and how can we actually work to make a compromise that would best suit both of our needs. Because I don't want to vote for something that's going to, really run us up the creek. And we've seen a lot of examples of that in the last 4 years, especially with the majority government. There's been no accountability. And again, I think making Huron-Bruce's yes conditional on making sure that our needs are met is taking far more advantage of any given situation than just saying, nope, no deals.
Thank you. Alan?
I've sort of based my candidacy on the notion that ridings across Canada, and particularly Huron-Bruce, need an MP who can be the voice of Huron-Bruce in Ottawa, not Ottawa's voice in Huron-Bruce. And by definition, yes, to answer the question, that means voting against or speaking against your party in the event that measures are being put forward that are contrary to the interests of Huron-Bruce. But MPs are not only effective when they cast a vote in the House of Commons. I worked there for 10 years and watched the way Parliament works. It's not just the House of Commons and the media scrums. MPs can be very effective in caucus, the meetings of their own party. Those meetings, by parliamentary tradition, are held behind closed doors. They are held in secret. And if a party is functioning the way it should be, those meetings are designed for MPs to speak their minds. I've been lucky to attend one of those meetings as a candidate. We were allowed to attend caucus. And I assure you that in that setting, there's also an opportunity for MPs to speak up for their riding and to be the voice of Huron-Bruce in Ottawa, not Ottawa's voice in Huron-Bruce.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you for the question. If you run for a political party, like all four of us have up here, and your party is government, I have news for all the candidates up here. You're going to vote for what you ran on. And if you didn't, you're being disingenuous here tonight. That's a fact of the matter. If you have an issue with something in your party's platform, I think you should have had that vetted long ago. So those are the realities. Now, specifically around supply management, because that is the IE supply management, every single candidate up here is going to stand up for that. There's no doubt about it. I had a meeting 2 years ago. I mean, Ethan was up there in Teeswater, and we met with producers from Huron-Bruce and Perth County, and we had a good, honest, and open discussion about the trade agreement with Europe. That's what a member of parliament does. They go right into the kitchen of a farmer, and you meet with the farmers, and you listen to their concerns, and you work it out and discuss it, and you work out the advantages. And if you take a look at the European Free Trade Agreement, that actually is going to work out to be a great opportunity for dairy farmers in Huron and Bruce County. There's thousands of tons of tariff-free opportunity for export in, I guess that's not the timer.
No, please turn off the electronic.
That's not the timer, I guess. I don't think Tony's timer sounds like that. So anyhow, that's what you do as a member of parliament, and you have to be prepared to fight on the Hill if it's the case. But for supply management, we've been there for farmers in Huron-Bruce, and like I said, this has been the absolute best decade for farming in the country's history.
Thank you. Jutta?
I think that policies and platforms are very, very comprehensive, and I truly do not agree with everything that my party comes up with. And I think it is important to always remember that we work for the people first, but if we don't talk to, like it is important, like not even, if only 50% come out and vote, how do we know what the rest wants? So I think it is wonderful to see how many people are today here together, and I think it's safe to say this is the best turnout we had. But real open discussions and town halls happen less and less in our riding, and people are not always comfortable to actually say what they feel. I think it is really important to be, as a member of parliament, respectful, and that people absolutely have the feeling, no matter what the issue is, I can go and have a deep conversation. And I think part why I'm here is I didn't have that experience. Like with my MPP, I mean, now I have a relationship with her. After I shared a meeting in the agriculture advanced program, I had the honor to be in a position where I had access to my MPP, but a lot of people are ticked off by their experience with politicians. They're disconnected, and I'm here to get that connection again. And I'm certainly, if I see that the majority wants something that...
Thank you. The next question. From sponsorship of Dutch families to host people, our rural communities have welcomed and supported newcomers. How will you assist local groups to welcome Syrian refugees to our community? And will your party increase the number of refugees permitted to immigrate and increase reverse recent cuts to health care and services for refugees? We'll start with Alan.
I think it's very interesting the way the refugee crisis in Syria really kind of burst onto the agenda of this election. I think it says a lot about Canada and Canadians that people have seized upon this issue as a very important one in this election. People often say that what's happening across the world, foreign affairs, doesn't matter that much in elections. I think the Syrian refugee issue has become quite central. And it's good to have a debate, it's good to have a discussion, I know there are some people, when you knock on doors, who've expressed some reservation about the notion of admitting endless numbers of people to Canada. And I think leaders have to show leadership, and I think we have to be careful. A couple of times in debates, the Prime Minister has talked about the other parties wanting to bring in hundreds of thousands of people and throw open the doors. No one has suggested that. I think all parties have been quite responsible in talking about how Canada can play its role on the world stage, and Canada, with its tradition, to take a leadership role in admitting Syrian refugees to Canada in an orderly fashion with, yes, some ability to screen for security, but really the priority should be, as we have done in the past. We did it in the 40s with displaced people from the Netherlands. We did it under a conservative, progressive conservative government in 1979, admitting 60,000 Vietnamese in the space of mere months. Those people have done enormously well in Canada. I think, as the Liberal Party has put forward, we could admit 25,000 people and they would become terrific members of the Canadian family.
Thank you. Ben?
The last point there about the reduction in healthcare and services, in fact, what we're offering and what we're proposing is exactly the same healthcare and benefits that each and every one of us have here in this room, no more and no less. That's a fact. We've committed to resettling 10,000 over the next year and a half to make sure that we do it in a safe and secure manner, and that all the refugees that we do resettle are coming in and are able to find a place to stay. Now, our office has already assisted people in our community that are interested in being hosts or host families. We've been doing that almost since when this recent crisis happened. Key points though, ladies and gentlemen. How many refugees are the Americans considering to resettle? Only 10,000 for a country 10 times the size of this country. Saudi Arabia, 0. Kuwait, 0. United Arab Emirates, 0. Yemen, 0. There's millions of displaced Syrians, geographically quite central to those areas I just mentioned. They should be welcoming more. They should be welcoming people, period. We're providing humanitarian aid in Jordan and other countries. In Jordan, there's over 1 million displaced people. So we provided humanitarian aid there. But ladies and gentlemen, we also have to be active trying to fight back ISIS. That's the reality. We've participated in Iraq and we've participated in Syria, and we need to make sure that we quell the threat of ISIS.
Thank you. Yuta?
Well, I think you picked just the numbers for countries that have the worst record. I mean, I could give you some numbers from European countries that are much smaller. Like, take Germany. It's just an eighth of the size of Ontario. And they're leaders. I'm not proposing that we should follow their footsteps, but I think from a humanitarian perspective, we certainly have to help refugees, and we have to help our communities by educating and basically getting away from the prejudice that we have. Not everybody from Syria is a potential terrorist, and I think if we make adjustment to our healthcare system, we can get more for the money we invest. It is not really, we get for, and so then we can service more people in a better way. So also, I think we are missing the point with our youth. We actually, by having youth that has no real plan and no real job opportunities, and where are those 18-year-olds that are gonna vote this year? I meet so many people that are discouraged, and those are the next ISIS fighters if we don't take action.
Thank you. Gerard?
Well, the answer to the first question, how will you assist local groups to welcome Syrian refugees? I think that really needs to be flipped around. I think it's, why can't the federal government take a lesson from our communities and be welcoming to refugees? Because we're seeing that right now. People are opening their hearts. Individuals are opening their hearts and opening their homes to actually welcome people because they're recognizing the urgency of this. They're not afraid that every other one is a terrorist, and I think that's a huge culture of fear that we have going on right now that we really need to address. But I guess for the second part of the question, we have a government that's getting people worked up, getting them even jealous about the health care that refugees receive, when really they should be upping their game and trying to work with the provinces and make sure that Canadians have increased health services. We shouldn't be trying to say, let's cut the service to refugees. Increase Canada's health. We shouldn't be an either or. We could be doing a lot better for our own citizens, and we could also be doing a lot better for the ones that are coming to Canada. Now the NDP's plan, accept 10,000 refugees this year, accept 9,000 every year after. But we also do have to add a few things to this. We have to stop discriminating on who we're going to welcome into this country based on religion. We have to stop the practice of cutting aid to countries that don't have free trade deals. We have to build a world that works here and not a world that's falling apart.
Thank you. This next question will be the last written one for this portion. Is it true that in the very near future, the majority of our apples will come from China? Who checks and controls any and all chemicals being used in any and all foreign countries? Our farmers have many restrictions. Do foreign countries follow the same rules? Ben?
The answer to that is yes. I would hope that most of the apples that we would eat in this area are from Ontario. The CFIA is in charge of this. They work on the ground in the countries where we import food from. Speaking generally, they work with processors, growers to make sure that they're held to the same standards that Canadian producers and growers are held to. You'll often hear on a sidebar conversation somewhere that, this comes in and it isn't held to the same rigor. It's absolutely untrue. It's checked there, it's checked here, and it's held to a very high standard. One mistake is too many mistakes, and that's when you're dealing with food safety and food security. You don't hear of any issues in Canada because we have a world-class system that CFIA has done. So as far as apples go, I would hope each and every one of us are buying apples that are grown in Ontario, but be rest assured that CFIA has a world-class inspection agency, and that we have people on the ground around the world in the countries that we do purchase food from and other products from that is making sure that it's held to the same standards.
Thank you. Yuta?
The Canadian Federal Inspection Agency has there's quite a few cuts. There's less inspectors. So the Green Party certainly sees that as an issue, that we do not have the, by having cuts, I think we have less service available. So that just on a sideline. And I truly hope and encourage people to follow the 200-mile diet and buy local, but that doesn't always happen. And but we have to be leader that way. I certainly have experienced in my international travel to Argentina that I was shocked that insecticides was mixed into grain. There was no inspector, and the answer is dilution is the solution to pollution. You cannot always find everything, and it is sometimes very hard to find these particles. So it is nice to hope that other countries have the same standards, but I think Canada has the highest standards, or one of the highest, and we have to cherish that and buy the product and support local. So if you don't want apples from China, you have a choice. Just don't buy them.
Thank you. Gerard?
Okay. Well, it's actually, this is a bit of a tough question because I will generally just take my apples on the side roads, just kind of drive by and pick them off. Sorry if it's your tree, but sorry.
You're okay with that?
Well, I guess. Foreign restrictions, though, again, this is applying, we have to make sure that we're applying Canadian standards to products that come into Canada as well. And this is another case where we have to make sure that we're not bowing under the weight of foreign pressure to reduce our very high standards in order to be able to compromise our markets, to be able to accept an influx from a country that, yeah, China is huge. Agriculture is huge. We have a country that could wipe out a provincial market in one go. And we have to make sure that we don't allow those types of things to happen. And so while we're trying to make sure that Canadian standards are protected in trade agreements with Canada, we also have to make sure that we're taking a look at the long-term consequences of this. Now, restrictions, do foreign countries follow the same rules? I hope so. In the case that they don't, I certainly hope that the Canadian government has the backbone to say, no, Canada's standards are high for a reason, and we want to keep it that way.
Thank you. Alan?
It's very important for us to have confidence in our food supply, but in order to have that confidence, Canadians have to know that the regulation management of our food supply is adequate. And yet, a recent report from the Auditor General found that under the Harper Conservative government, officials from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the CFIA, just do not have enough time available to deliver proper quality verification, and sometimes skip follow-up procedures. The Auditor General concluded that even when the government identifies a problem, it takes too long to develop and implement solutions. That's worrisome, and I can assure you a Liberal government will make sure that Canada's food safety system is effective, minimizes risks, so that we can assure Canadians the food on their table, whether it's domestic and homegrown or an import, is safe.
Thank you. That concludes that part of this evening. For the questions from the floor, I will start by drawing 2 cards from what we have received, and I will ask those 2 people to come to the mic. The first one will ask their question. You are limited to 1 minute to ask the question, so please say it promptly as the mic will be shut off. Then, after you have asked your question, please return to your seat. After we have completed the first question, I will draw the card for the third person so that we always know who will be the next one up to the mic. Helen Dykstra. And Carolyn Parks Mintz.
This isn't maybe related to agriculture, but I think it's important. Do you think any party with 39% of the vote should get 100% of the power?
Let's start with Judith.
Thank you so much. I just want to remind you of the Green Party had 1 million votes, almost 1 million votes in 2008. And how many members of parliament did we have? None. So if we had proportional representation, we would have had 10 MPs. So I truly think that we are not this first past the post is just not doing us the job. We are not being represented, and I truly believe that if people will do over and over the same thing and expect different results, then I have very little hope for this country. So I truly think that in this election you have to vote for a party that definitely will bring a better election system, that you don't have the situation that you just described. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Gerard?
Well, the short answer is no. That party should not. Now, the NDP is a very strong advocate. We've been the only consistent advocate for proportional representation. Now that the Liberals are in third place, they have also jumped on that boat after refusing it for years. But the NDP has always championed having an equal number of seats for your votes. Yutta's example is fantastic. The Green Party, they would benefit the most from proportional representation. They are pulling in millions of votes every year, and yet they have very few seats. One, they had some crossovers, but that shouldn't be it. The percentage of votes should actually be represented in Parliament. Now, it's a sad case with the system that we have now, and what we're seeing now, though, is people taking advantage of that. If people do recognize and are humbled by the fact that they got 39% of the vote, but they do have the majority of seats. Harper said this, and I was hopeful in 2011. I remember him saying this, we won't forget the 60% that didn't vote for us, but he did on day 2.
Thank you. Alan?
Well, Gerard, I've got news for you. The Liberals are not in third place, but we'll see what happens. The Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau made a very, very major announcement even before the election was called, committing to a plan for open government and democratic reform. And in addition to proposals for changing the way government works, changing the Senate, more free votes, ending omnibus bills, a very interesting and important package. The Liberal Party has committed that this will be the last election held in Canada under the first past the post system. And the commitment is that within 18 months of forming a government, the Liberal Party would find a way for us as a country, as a group of citizens, to have the national conversation that we must have to arrive at a new, more fair and more balanced system for electing our governments. Now, we differ from the NDP. We will not predetermine the result of that process. We're not going to tell you the answer before we ask the question. The approach the Liberal Party has taken, the system we have is broken. I think we all recognize that. We need to fix it. We need to have a national conversation involving all Canadians and all political parties, and all party parliamentary committee should set upon a new system, be it proportional representation, be it ranked ballots, be it some other hybrid system. But yes, we must change our electoral system.
Thank you. The Liberals thought the system worked quite well when they were winning elections. When they're in third place, they've had a change of heart. We've worked to improve democracy. One is redistribution to improve the representation by population. I think that's been effective. We've made some changes to help allow more Canadians to vote. I think that's going to work out very well in the upcoming election. With proportional representation, those that say they want proportional representation are also the ones that criticize the Senate for being unelected and unaccountable. But with proportional representation, you have the very same thing. You have people appointed by party figureheads that go in, and you have proportional representation. No one knows who they are. No one is accountable. When you have a system like we have here, if you vote for a particular person and they are elected and they're the member of parliament, you think they do a good job, that's great. If you don't think they do a good job, you vote for somebody else. The system works. Just because you're in third place or second place every once in a while doesn't mean we have to shake the whole thing up. In addition to that, I would also argue if you take a look at Canada relative to the rest of the developed economies and the developed democracies, take a look at the success Canada has. Surplus, added 1.3 million net new jobs since 2009, and has the lowest debt to GDP ratio amongst the developed economies. We've been able to get things done and get things done for all Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Fine. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Claire Taylor will have question number 3. And for the people on standby, please feel free to use the chairs near the mic. We don't expect you to stand up for all the answers. Question number 2 now.
Yes, I'm very concerned about the destruction of records and historical data, the closing of libraries, and the shutting down of research facilities and scientific entities that has been ongoing for some time. These records cannot be retrieved, some of them, and will impact decisions that are made in our country going forward. For my kids and my grandkids, the stuff is gone. I want to know your party's position. I know the Conservatives' position on this particular topic, Mr. Law, but perhaps you'd address it as well. I would like to know the other party's position on retaining these, and these are agricultural records as well. We need this material to make decisions. Never mind the long-form census, there is other material that is just gone. How will you deal with preserving this in the future, and what's your opinion personally?
Start with Gerard.
Okay. Well, first, I think we have a government that is allergic to inconvenient information. It's the only way I can really explain it that would make any sense to me. Now, as far as getting that back, I mean, what we can do is invest in research and development. And that includes not only trying to bring back, we have an ambitious plan to try and make sure that we have research in place, protect 20% of our coastal waters. We want to actually make sure that we're restoring scientific funding where it matters on environmental sciences, agricultural sciences, even human sciences, because we're missing so much data. And I know when you mentioned the long-form census, I mean, that really is a huge point, though. We have data just completely missing. We don't even know where we're at right now. And so it's very easy to say we're doing better than ever before, but we can't back that up. And that's a huge problem. And as somebody who's been reporting for a very, very long time, I can tell you, trying to look things up and the data's just not there to correlate. It's not even trying to correlate your opinion. It's just that the data is not even there to have an opinion. And that is a very dangerous place to be. And so we have to advocate to actually be able to open the discussion. Sometimes the truth is inconvenient. Sometimes the truth hurts. But if you don't know the truth, you can't react positively or negatively, or even plan for your own future, let alone the future of the country.
Thank you. Alan?
Well, this is our 5th debate, I guess, and I think at a certain point we're starting to get to know each other's answers. So I know what Mr. Law was going to tell you in a moment, that science is alive and well in Canada, that Canada is a Shangri-La for scientific research and scientists. And just let me tell you that you don't have to take this from me. I think there is just an overwhelming international and Canadian consensus that we have a government that has brutalized science, scientific research, knowledge, a government that would actually countenance the destruction of libraries and records and files. It's been devastating. And this speaks to a government that operates on the basis of ideology as opposed to the Canadian tradition of evidence-based policymaking. And this includes science, the kind of science that is critical for agriculture and that has been cut drastically as other fields of science have. But this same approach translates into the way public servants are treated in Canada. Public servants are afraid to speak their minds. They are afraid to provide the evidence that is needed to make sound, evidence-based policy in this country. We have to return to those Canadian traditions.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you for the question. The premise of the question is actually incorrect. The records that you speak of were digitized. They're in electronic format now, so they're available. All research that is done is stored. They're stored at data centers around the country. Take, for example, studies that have been done just in this area alone, the Health Canada wind turbine study. It is stored at a university, at one of the data centers. I mean, that's the way it works in the year 2015. It's not 1971 anymore, where it has to be all paper. We can digitize records, and we can also store current information digitally. In regards to science and technology and the investments this government's made, the national media, the opposition parties, they have it wrong. Our government has invested heavily, more heavily than any other government before it, because we know the return on investment on science and technology and research and development is huge. Take a look just specifically around agriculture. There's been over $1 billion invested in science and technology and research and development the last 9 years. Take a look. We've had great results. We partner with business, we partner with universities, we have great yields on our agricultural crops. You just need to go up and down the country roads. Take a look what the equipment manufacturers have been able to accomplish with technological innovations. Take a look at the combines, take a look at the tractors, take a look at the planters. This government bases its decisions on science and sound science. If you take a look just on the issue around neonicotinoids, the province of Ontario bases it on ideology and no science. We base our decision on sound science. That's why the Grain Farmers of Ontario supports our position and supports decisions made based on sound science by scientists. Thank you.
Thank you. Yuta?
Well, it's not fiction, it's truth that some of our candidates for the Green Party, for example, Dr. Lynn Kwame, she experienced that her level of funding, research funding, went down to a level of 25% before the Conservative Party took power. So these are facts and not fiction. So the scientists, if we value science and if we value information, then it has to be accessible. And we experience that it is often not the case that it is easy accessible. So the Green Party stands for open source data access. And also we have budgeted to restore scientific capacity to the federal government of $75 million. So it is important that we do value and not make sure that scientists that did this hard work actually find their scientific work years later. And we heard that in the past that that's not the case. So we have to really walk the talk.
Thank you. The fourth question will be Jim Hollingworth. Claire, you can go ahead, please. Yep.
Good evening. I'd like to address these concerns to Mr. Thompson. And well, the first one is budget, surplus, deficit. Most Canadians, even intelligent Canadians, don't understand this. They think we've got a surplus, we're fine. They don't understand the whole picture. The second thing that I find many people, my age, a bit younger, a bit older, have no concept that we do not have a progressive Conservative Party in Ottawa. We have a party that conned the name. They don't understand that. So if Mr. Thompson would speak to that and clarify it, thank you.
Thank you. Another one of these important debates, deficit versus surplus. And I think we do have to be very, very careful of the math. We've heard a lot of figures and numbers tonight. Sometimes you wonder if the books are cooked in order to reach that thing called a surplus after running 7 deficits in a row. In an election year, the government claims to be in surplus. I think we need to look at this a bit more broadly and decide, what does our country, what do our communities need right now more than anything else? They need a government that has a plan, that has some vision of what we should do in the future, and realizes we need to make investments in our country, in our young people, in our community centers, in childcare, in health care, in taking care of our seniors. These things do cost money. And Justin Trudeau, I think, has been very straightforward. I think has been more honest and straightforward with the electors than the other leaders have, because the leaders of the NDP and the Conservative Party are promising to remain in surplus, not to run deficits. I'm not sure how you can do that, given the promises that they have made. Justin Trudeau has set out a plan for deficits over 3 years, not exceeding $10 billion per year. $10 billion in a $2 trillion economy is a rounding error. And this is the time for us to invest. Interest rates are the lowest they have been in anyone's lifetime. It's the time to invest in our communities.
Thank you. Although the question was directed to Mr. Thompson, all candidates will be given an opportunity to speak to it. Ben?
Okay, it is true. Last year we were in surplus, $1.9 billion surplus. The first 5 months of this year, we're in a surplus of over $5 billion. That's a huge success. There's been 1.3 million net new jobs created since 2009. Our government has proven that you can balance the budget, reduce taxes, and increase benefits for all Canadians. We've done that. What Justin Trudeau is doing is right out of the playbook of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne, and it's spend, spend, spend. You do not go into deficit when your economy is growing. Annualized basis, we're going to grow between 2 and 3% this year. Now is not the time to go into deficit, structural deficit potentially. In addition to that, there's a $6.5 billion hole in their plan. It was John McCallum that said Saturday at their economic platform, everything is on the table when they're looking at cuts to balance the budget. They're going to increase payroll taxes in the form of Canada Pension for their Kathleen Wynne, Justin Trudeau Ontario pension plan. That's $1,000 for everybody that makes $60,000. They're going to increase EI rates. The list goes on and on and on, ladies and gentlemen. This is not the time to go into a deficit. We've just got out of balance. We have one of the best debt to GDP ratios in the world. Only a person that thinks budgets balance themselves would believe that.
Thank you. Judith?
The Green Party budget has a small surplus, but I don't think these numbers don't mean that much to me if it's a few $1 million plus or minus. But the big picture is having a almost $700 billion debt. So how are we going to take care of that? And that's the big question. So how are we, it's just bad management. I think I can't run my business like that. And there's where we have to really address, and municipalities have to spend on their means too. And we should really, as Canadians, not create more debt. And I find it's irresponsible.
Thank you. Gerard?
I guess if $10 billion is a rounding error, the premise of running $10 billion deficits is a paper-thin facade that holds no validity whatsoever. And it should also be noted that, well, we've had 2 majority governments over the last 20 years, and you can take a look. Firstly, we had the famous deficit slayer Paul Martin. What he actually did was slay the military budget and raid the EI fund. The same with Stephen Harper. And so when you're running deficits, surpluses, you're playing with numbers. The NDP's goal, live within your means. Don't spend more than you're taking in, and reinvest where it's going to pay off most. Because right now, we have a very dire situation. And if you look at EI, which the Liberals and the Conservatives rated $57 billion from, the truth of the matter is, the people that need it most can't even access it. It's the people that, well, don't qualify. 36% of these people, or 60% of these people, or more, are actually the working poor, the people that can't get by because they're not actually making enough money or getting enough hours to be able to qualify for EI. Again, a fund that was rated by both previous majority governments, and yet it's those people that need it most that are actually paying for this system because they don't qualify. So every cent they make that goes into that, they're not getting a cent out of that. And so we really have to recognize when we're talking about deficits, surpluses, we have to realize who's actually paying for this stuff. And so we have to reprioritize. That's why the NDP, personal tax is flat, small business tax is down, corporate taxes up 2%.
Thank you. Okay. The final question will be Tony Rodriguez. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Harper's government, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Mr. Harper's government is profoundly anti-scientific. In the past 5 years alone, he has fired 2,000 federal scientists that Canadians rely upon to give evidence-based data on our food, our environment, on global warming, etc., etc. The remaining scientists are scared. They cannot say anything to the public without going to the PMO's office to have it vetted, manicured, delayed, and sometimes rejected. Quite frankly, Mr. Harper has caused a national disgrace for this and other reasons. What do you four members plan to do about this to take the power away from the PMO's office and restore the trust in the federal scientists that he's fired or gagged? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, once again, your question on science is incorrect. We've made record investments. We've made record investments in science research and development. Just take a look at Health Canada, for example. There's over $1 billion each and every year invested in science and research and development to have better health outcomes for all Canadians. Public servants, whether you believe this or not, they do a great job. Scientists' job is to collect data. Their job is to present it to their departments. Their job is to present it to their elected ministers and members of parliament and direct and inform and make informed policy decisions. Let's be clear, ladies and gentlemen. Scientists do the work. They do not run this country. We take their information and we make the best decisions possible, balancing the economy and the environment and the well-being for all Canadians. We've done this. That's why we see the success that we have in this country. That's why we've been able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Liberals failed miserably in their 13 years. Emissions went up 30%. We've been able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's what happens when you use the best science available to make policy decisions. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Yuta?
If the government would believe in the scientists, climate change is like over 97% of scientists agree that it exists. Our government ignores it. No, on top of it, they actually do pay over $1 million subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. That should stop. plus also other subsidies to the nuclear industry. It does not build a new or refurbish a reactor without our taxes as a loan credit. No other industry has that privilege. So I totally do not agree with this. I find that you forget to say that Canada is one of the highest emitter of greenhouse gases. How can we ignore that? It makes me angry. I think our young people deserve a government that believes that we have to get off the fossil fuel era, and spiritual leaders in the world understand it. They understand that we have to go, we have an opportunity, we have cost competitive, renewable ways of producing our energy. And that is forward thinking. So I truly thank you for this comment, for the question, and I think scientists need to be listened, and we can't just pick the scientists that fit us. And if you believe in science, you will also see that we need better standards. Our water has no standard. We have the poorest standards on radionuclides for the Great Lakes. That's unacceptable. We paid scientists to come to the relicensing hearings.
Thank you. Gerard?
Well, one tool to make sure that science is strong in Canada is quit using the Canada Revenue Agency as a way to shut them down. We shouldn't be auditing these scientific groups. The environmentalist groups are First Nations because they're posting findings that are inconvenient to our government's particular bent. And another thing, and I guess I can use a personal analogy for this, I worked, and I know this is weird because I'm a left-leaning politician, I worked for Sun Media for most of the past 10 years. And to be honest, I was always incredibly intimidated writing farming stories. Always, because farmers have long memories, and I did never, ever want to screw it up. But another reason was, another Sun Media publication was the Ontario Farmer. They are the pros. They knew what they were talking about. And if there was an ag story to be had, I would far rather put my trust in a reporter from the Farmer than myself at the time. And how does this tie in? Well, I'm going to tell you. Right now, we got bureaucrats that know nothing about the things that they're okaying scientists to speak about. So if you have, well, any issue really, I mean, there's a lot of science that's over my head. But it shouldn't be handled with bureaucrats. You shouldn't have to compromise your integrity and your work by handing it to some kid that has no idea what you're talking about, even though you sunk your whole life into that work. Boil it down to 2 or 3 speaking points, dumb it down, and then hand it back. And it would just be heartbreaking to have to deliver your own information diluted to the fact, to the point where it's skim milk anyway.
Thank you. Alan?
Jim, thanks for your question. I do not reject the premise of your question. When Mr. Lobb does, I think we're hearing the voice of Stephen Harper in Huron-Bruce. This Harper government's war on science is not only a violation of decades of Canadian experience. It's worrisome in and of itself for everything that it represents. But I think it's even more troubling because of what it represents more broadly about the way we have been governed by Stephen Harper. This is a government that does not believe in evidence-based policymaking. And that's the foundation of Canadian government, not just in the fields of science, but in our public service, in our foreign service. When I would travel as a correspondent for the Toronto Star to other countries, the first person I would often try to arrange to go and see would be the Canadian ambassador, Canada's eyes and ears in the world. Under this government, those Canadian ambassadors are forbidden from speaking to members of the news media, either on or off the record. This is a government that has devastated science, knowledge, our public service, our foreign service, all of these pillars of Canadian democratic tradition. That's the reason I made a decision to get into politics, to run for office. This has to stop.
Thank you. Your last question.
Thank you. For the last 15 years, the research has proven that the honeybees are fast disappearing. The honeybees contribute 85% of our food supply. And since most of us are farmers, I want to know from the last 15 years, especially the conservatives and the liberals before them, why didn't you do squat about it? Remember, after the last honeybee is gone, you only have 7 years to live. Thank you.
Yuta?
On a personal base, I can say like we have bees on our farm. We have about 20 hives, and we do not use neonicotinoids. We still have bee starving population. Like those are not our own bees, but we hear the reports, and I truly think that it is multiple reasons why the bee population are reducing. So I think it's hard to say finger pointing, but I think in general we have to see that modern farming and how we live has an impact, and we have to look at it, and it's not just caused by one thing. So it's really linked together, and we have to have a wholesome approach that economic success and environmental health goes together. And I mean, the Green Party has carried that message for so long. You cannot ignore the environment. There's always a price to it. And so I think that I will have that holistic approach, and I'm not taking one side or the other, and I think we have to take action and take it serious. But on our farm, Health Canada is doing some research, and they, in our area in Huron-Bruce, it's the second year where they keep an eye on to really get to the cause and do have some more information.
Thank you. Gerard?
Well, with neonics, it's I don't know. It's a point of whose science is right. That's the battle that's going on right now, and there's no doubt that we have had some very difficult winters for bees. We have lost some significant amounts, but farmers are trying, and I do see that as well. And we're seeing that right now with, fluency agents and trying to move away from, say, like a talc-based coating to more of a wax. And so they're trying. The NDP, we do want to gradually and significantly reduce our pesticide use. And we also have to look at how we're creating habitats for pests. The more acreage of a single crop that we have, the more we're fostering those types of pests. So we have to really take a look at integrated pest management, trying to do crop rotation, trying to really eliminate the breeding grounds, I guess, or at least eliminate the opportunities, really try to mix things up and make sure that we're not just fostering certain kinds of pests. But we also have to make sure that, is it even necessary? You look at the numbers for soybeans, and it's arguably whether it's really even effective in soybean crops. And you can take a look at things like aphids or bean leaf beetles. The timeline for when they're actually feeding on these plants is actually past, I guess, the best before date for the neonics, even in the plant system. So you really have to take a look at that too. And it's going to take both sides sitting down, going over these numbers, going over, well, two sets of facts, and really finding the common ground and hammering this out.
Thank you. Alan?
It's a very important question, and it comes back to the issue of evidence-based decision-making. There is no question the sudden seemingly widespread loss of honeybee colonies is an urgent problem. This requires our immediate attention. Now, there's a standing committee on agriculture, agri-food. They have heard from beekeepers, from farmers, from academics, from experts, and what's frustratingly clear after all of that is that a single cause for these deaths in Ontario has yet to be identified. It is clear something is causing bee colonies to collapse, and we need to look diligently for a solution. Now, it's also very clear that grain farmers, and I've met with them, are very, very concerned about efforts to reduce the use of neonics. The Pest Management Regulatory Agency, PMRA, this is the Health Canada agency, federal government agency, is doing a review of neonics. They're supposed to report in 2018. That's 3 years from now. The Liberal Party agrees with those who are calling for this process to be expedited. We have to speed up that review. We can't wait that long to figure this out. And once we get some answers, we need to act immediately, but we need to act on scientifically based conclusions.
Thank you. Ben?
Thanks very much. In the last question, I told you that science is alive and well and thriving in this country, and I thank Yuta for making my point by saying that Ag Canada researchers are working on our farm doing studies. So thank you for proving my point that they're alive and well in this country. The difference between our government and, say, for example, the Liberals, whether it's Justin Trudeau or Kathleen Wynne, is we make our decisions based on science. I was the chair of the Health Committee. We reviewed the Pest Control Products Act. The PMRA appeared, and they continued to reinforce our position that the decisions will be made on science. The provincial Liberals make theirs on ideology. Okay, an 80% reduction by 2017 without even consulting the very farmers it affects. That's a shame. That's not making your decisions based on science. It's making your decision based on public opinion. And we've seen time and time again, that's what Justin Trudeau does. Through this process, beekeepers have learned a lot. They've improved their practices. Grain farmers have also worked very collaboratively and cooperatively with them to try and minimize mortality rates in the beehives. So this is right. The circle of life needs to be maintained. We need to make the decisions based on science. That's what we're doing, and that's what we're going to do. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. We'll go to closing remarks now. I'll remind the candidates that they each have 2 minutes to speak, and we will start with Alan Thompson.
Well, thank you very much for your attention tonight. Thank you to the Federation for hosting this very, very important debate. As I said at the beginning, I think this is the most important election in a generation. You're here tonight because you will have to make a choice. And in fact, you sort of have to make a number of choices. You will have to choose who among us do you want as your member of parliament. You're also choosing who do you want to govern this country? What kind of Prime Minister do you want as Canada's leader? Now, as the candidates put forward to be the Member of Parliament for Huron-Bruce, I think it's really incumbent on all of us to explain to you at events like this why we think we have the qualifications to be your next Member of Parliament. And that's why I began by speaking about my farm upbringing, my early life here in this area in Bruce County, but I think it's also relevant to look at the career experience that we bring to the table and that we put forward. And I've worked for 30 years in journalism and in public affairs in this country, and I would like very much to put those skills to work to represent the people of Huron-Bruce to the best of my ability. But you also face a choice. What kind of government do you want? And I think there are two choices left to you. More of the same, a Harper government of secrecy and Mike Duffy scandals, or the vision put forward by Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, a positive, optimistic vision for the future of this country. Please vote for the Liberal Party, for me, your candidate, Alan Thompson. Thank you.
Thank you. Gerard Rasmussen.
This election presents an opportunity to change directions after nearly 150 years of red and blue governments. It's an opportunity for progress and prosperity. And we need to contemporize politics because the next generation of voters don't feel they have a choice that reflects their views. They're leaving Huron-Bruce because job opportunities dried up, and we have to create new ones for them to come home to. Now, I got into this race because I don't want to see our hometowns fade away. And I know nobody does, and we're stronger than that. And I know because I've been there all the way, writing your stories, and I can say that quite literally in this room tonight, taking your photos and following up on our greatest successes and our greatest tragedies. I'm 34 years old, and as you know, I've been working in local news for nearly 10 years, and I have an intimate knowledge of how rural Ontario works because it's been the focus of my entire career. I'm a first-generation Canadian on my father's side, or new stock if you want to go by Harper's definition. My family came to Canada from Belgium 8 years after the Second World War because my grandfather didn't want his sons to go through what he went through. Canada accepted them, and they accepted us with open arms. But Canada's arms are closing, and so is its mind. People are afraid now, afraid of the unknown, afraid for their jobs, afraid for their families. And now the Reds and the Blues want you to be afraid of us. The Conservatives will tell you they can't afford the NDP. Meanwhile, under Harper, they racked up 1/4 of Canada's total debt since Confederation. The Liberals will try and tell you an NDP vote is a wasted vote. Meanwhile, they are third place in Huron-Bruce, and they know it. The NDP wants, and I want, to shift the focus back to people, because it's our votes that build governments, and it's our votes that can take them down. My Canada has consequences when the powerful prey on the weak. To those good small C Conservatives who Harper ignored, to those blue Liberals who want stability and steady leadership, to all those Greens who want fair and truly representative elections next time, join with me and vote NDP. Join with us, and let's take the power back.
Thank you. Eunice Flathauser.
My friends, today you got to meet me, and I can tell you, what you see is what you get. I'm honest and committed, and I will help restore good government and work collaboratively. I can offer you my open mind and ability to listen with respect, all in an effort to build a sustainable, prosperous Huron-Bruce. I believe in a fair and accountable government, leadership that shares the facts, how they are, and have a balanced approach with helping to involve more partners in decision making. A positive vision and hard work will beat the broken status quo. I'm here as your candidate to be your representative in Ottawa by applying my skill set to the best of my ability. If I don't have the answer, I'll promise I will get it for you and for all of us. On October 19th, just remember that your ballot is about opening up choices. Lead with your vote. Elect a Green MP for Huron-Bruce. I asked you in this election, vote with your head and your heart. Vote for Jutta Splatzdasser. Vote for a Canada that works together.
Thank you. And Ben Lobb.
Thanks, Joan. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to first congratulate the Federation for the best run debate that we've had so far. So congratulations to Joan, the people at the table and the volunteered tonight. It was a great exchange of ideas. Our government understands that hard-working Canadian farm families and the businesses they run are key drivers in our economy. Under previous Liberal governments, Canadian farmers and farming communities were neglected and left to face the significant challenges of modern-day farming without the right tools or support. Since 2006, our government has taken action for Canadian farm families by delivering the right tools and programs to help farm families deal with environmental challenges and uncertainties, investing in research and development so farmers can strengthen their production, working to secure the health and integrity of Canada's food supply, and opening markets while continuing to protect and preserve jobs for Canadian farmers on tables around the world. Expanded free trade is a huge opportunity for our farmers and rural communities. Canada's prosperity is built on supplying agricultural and other products to the world, including many products grown locally here in Huron-Bruce. Our commitment on supply management is clear. We will defend supply management and protect our dairy farmers. Ladies and gentlemen, only our Conservative government can be trusted to protect and preserve jobs for Canadian farmers, balance the budget, keep taxes low, and protect benefits for all Canadians. Thank you for your time, and October 19th, I ask you to vote Ben Lobb, vote Conservative. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the Huron County Federation of Agriculture, I would like to thank John Rowe and Tony Martins from Clinton Toastmasters for doing the timing. I would like to thank the Huron County Federation of Agriculture directors for volunteering their time, the audience members for their questions and attendance, and I thank the candidates for their participation in the meeting and for running for office. We wish them all the best in their campaign, and I encourage everyone to vote. You are invited to stay for coffee and water and a chance to talk individually with the candidates after the meeting. On the way out, if you're interested, there is a contact information sheet available for pickup. And I received word that the Blue Jays won the division title for the first time in 22 years.